What is happening, everybody? It is Trey here. I'm joined again by my dad, Sean. And today we are up in our quest of reviewing every Beatles album in chronological order to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. You know, as always, this is the first time we have heard this record. We really loved Revolver. We're incredibly hyped to see what they offered next, and boy, we were not disappointed. And if this is your first time joining us, y'all, we really appreciate you stopping by. Here at Reactions to the Classics, we react and do detailed track-by-track reviews to some of the most classic records of all time. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And if you would like to connect with us more, be sure to click the link below. Join our Facebook group. We have a bunch of great discussion there. And for our Patreons, we are going to have an exclusive bonus video where we're going to dig even deeper into Sgt. Pepper's, even more facts and great discussion. So check out that link below. And all that fun stuff to say, let's get into some quick facts.
All right, Trey, well, as you mentioned, we're going through the whole discography. This is the 8th of 12 UK albums for the Beatles. We always follow the UK track. This thing was ranked number 1.
Top spot.
Top spot on the Rolling Stones greatest 500 albums of all time. It was released on May 26th, 1967 in the UK. It was supposed to be June 1st. You're going to see it listed still as June 1st in several places. That's incorrect. It was May 26th. They had to move up the release date. June 2nd in the United States. This is the very first album in the discography where the tracks are the same, exact same album in the US and the UK. This thing was number 1 for 26 weeks in the UK, 15 weeks in the United States. Sold 2.5 million albums in the first 3 months of its release, making it the most successful Beatles album ever up to that date. Sold over 32 million albums worldwide as of right now. Now, the time taken to record this thing. The Beatles' first album was recorded in about 11 hours. Rubber Soul, 80 hours. Now, all these are not including mixing. It's just the recording process. Revolver, 220 hours. Sgt. Pepper's, 400 hours.
So we just keep ramping up as our experimentation gets more and more.
Exactly. And the recording engineer, Jeff said that he estimated they spent another 300 hours mixing it. So you're talking about 700 hours to do this album. Now, Trey, how did we get here? Well, they just came off the tour after Revolver, 3-month tour. They didn't play any songs from Revolver, ironically enough. They get back from that tour in August of 1966, and George Harrison tells the Beatles manager, Brian Epstein, I quit.
Yeah, I'm
out. I'm done. It was insane when they toured. We covered this and other stuff. He didn't want to do it anymore. Epstein assured him, we're not going to tour anymore. So the guys took a 3-month break, and they all did different things. Ringo did the most normal thing. He spent time with his wife and kid. George went to India to explore his Hindu faith further. He was there for 6 weeks. Lennon goes and stars in a movie, How I Won the War. And he also, when he gets back to London, gets into the art scene, goes to all these art galleries. And at one of those art galleries, he meets Yoko. And Paul. First, he does a soundtrack with George Martin, the producer for the Beatles, called The Family Way. And then he goes on a worldwide vacation with Mal Evans, who was a roadie. They return from Kenya, and on the return flight, he gets the idea for Sgt. Pepper. When they were touring in the US, he saw these long band names, all these bands doing different things. He wanted to do it for the Beatles, Trey. He wanted to try something different, but he knew people would never accept it. So they get served a meal, as legend says, on the plane, and there's a tray with an S and a tray with a P, and Mal asked Paul, what does that mean? He said salt and pepper, and it just came into his head, Sgt. Pepper's. We could record as them and do all kinds of different things. Now, sessions on this album began November 24th, and the first 3 songs they recorded were Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, and When I'm 64. So it looked like it was going to take on the theme of their childhood.
You'll notice on this record and during the recording sessions, this furthered what they started on Revolver, using the studio as an instrument. We had Jeff Emmerich, the musical engineer, back on this. Of course, George Martin as the expert producer. We have a bunch of orchestra sections, especially in A Day in the Life, of course. Sound effects are thrown throughout here. Very unique, just tape manipulation. This has been described as one of the first art rock LPs by many critics here, and it incorporates a wide array of styles. Of course, you have your vaudevillain, your circus, your avant-garde, your classical Western music, your Indian music.
Yeah.
So they really just opened the minds of a bunch of people, I'm sure, in 67.
And as I mentioned earlier, the first experiment in November of 1966 was Strawberry Fields Forever. Then they record Penny Wayne. Come February of 67, Brian Epstein and EMI start pressuring George Martin. We need a single. So Martin gives them Strawberry Fields Forever, and Penny Wayne is a double A-sided
Talk
single.
about a 1-2 punch, eh?
He said later on it was the biggest mistake he ever made in his professional life because he didn't include him on the album after that. Because back then the Beatles and Martin didn't believe that their fans should have to pay twice for music. So if it was released as a single, they took it off the album. But if you're familiar with Strawberry Fields Forever, totally fits the vibe of this. And that's what Martin said. It should have been built off of this.
A lot of people believe this is when McCartney became the dominant creative force.
Yes.
In the Beatles, he wrote over half the material.
Ringo said his endearing memory from these recording sessions where he learned how to play chess because he wasn't in the studio a lot. Harrison said he didn't enjoy it very much because they didn't get to play as a band much. It was very piecemeal out. Lennon said he didn't enjoy it either because he felt like he was kind of a made-to-order writing guy, that he didn't really write a lot of the songs from the heart. He said he didn't believe it was a concept album either, besides the first song and then Paul introducing Billy Shears going to the second song and then the reprise. He said otherwise all my songs could have been on any other album.
And another striking part of this record is the album cover. This was made with 57 paper cutouts and 9 wax figures. There's a wide assortment of famous people on here, from sportsmen to musicians, scientists. You have Bob Dylan, Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando, and Lennon even wanted to include Jesus, Gandhi, and Hitler. And it's just very striking. The 4 lads are there in their flamboyant outfits, and it just kind of shows the further progression of their no longer mop top 4 guys in suits. We're going to come out with all colorful. We're going to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band for this record.
And on that note, let's get to it. First track, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, written by McCartney, sung by McCartney. It's only 2 minutes long, but it is banging.
Oh, yeah, it does a great job because you hear some chatter in the background whenever this starts, and almost like an orchestra tuning up, and then we just go, the drums compounding in, and feel like, okay, I'm sitting about to watch a band perform in concert.
Exactly, and the orchestra was taken from A Day in the Life. The orchestra was tuning up for that song, which is going to end this album.
So it's kind of that's a unique way to kind of connect and bookend the albums with the orchestra. And I just love the first line. It was 20 years ago today, Sergeant.
20 years ago today.
Yeah, I think that just does a great way of getting the audience in tune to, like, okay, we're into something special here. It's gonna be it was a nice rocking track, short, sweet, to the point, and I like the way that we just fade right into the next track.
And it's that way on this entire album. It's the first album to not have any differentiation between the songs. They fade in and out, crossfade at the beginning and the end, so you feel like you're watching a live performance.
And because they're talking about Billy Shears.
Let me introduce you to Billy Shears.
And then we fade right into, and there's like a crowd going in unison, Billy Shears. Just thought that was really cool because it segues right into Ringo's a deep voice singing What Would You Think If I Sang Out of Tune, and it's called With a Little Help from My Friends. This is ranked number 311th on the Rolling Stones top 500 songs of all time, and I like how they threw Ringo an early song on the record.
Yeah, one of the things to try to listen for on this thing is it's a call and response with Ringo, and then Lennon and McCartney are singing the backing vocals. So Lennon and McCartney start out asking him questions, and then he flips it around at the end.
Yeah, and it's interesting because these are like deep questions too.
Meaning of friendship and true love.
Ringo's longing for some love. He wants somebody. They ask him, would you believe in love at first sight? Lennon and McCartney do, and he says, I'm sure it happens all the time.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of longing for that, and in the meantime, he gets by with a little help from his friends. He gets high with a little help from his friends.
Yeah, it's going to be a recurring theme on this album.
Mid-60s, got to throw a little veiled drug reference in here.
The lyrics were written by Lennon and McCartney in a very simple way, in a very limited range for Ringo. There was one high note at the end that he couldn't hit, and so McCartney spent hours working with him on it. But they decide at the end of this long day, Ringo's walking up the stairs of Abbey Road Studio Number 2 to leave, and the other three convince him to come back down. They stick a mic in the middle of the room, and the other three are around him, giving him moral support. So at 5:45 a.m., he sang the song, which makes it 10 times more impressive. Just after that long day, he finishes at 5:45 a.m. One of the best songs on here, and that's saying something. All right, Trey, now we're up to Lennon's first track, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He wrote it, he sang it. This song caused a lot of controversy because if you take out LSD, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, so many people still think this was about LSD. The BBC actually banned this song because of that. He swears it wasn't. It was inspired by his son Julian, who was 3 at the time. Came home with a drawing, says Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He said that is beautiful. Ringo was actually there at his house when this happened. He swears Julian came home and said that. And then McCartney backed it up years later in the 80s. This song was not about LSD. It was truly about Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
The arrangement of the music really sets a great tone for kind of a whimsical, fantasy-like song. Whenever I was listening to this, I was imagining that I was literally just in the sky at night or whatever. You could just imagine almost floating up into the space.
Yeah, it takes you away, definitely.
Yeah.
It's an escapism song. I love it.
And Harrison provides his electric guitar through the direct injection that we were talking about earlier, right through that Leslie speaker. He also plays the tambura. And I just thought that the arrangement of it really put to the forefront that, hey, these guys are experts in the studio. Then that takes us into the McCartney-led track, Getting Better. Lennon sings in the chorus of this as well. And I just thought this was another fantastic track. I really loved the subject matter on this because it reflects what people go through in real life, that you have McCartney over here singing It's Getting Better all the time, and then Lennon in the background in a softer voice is saying couldn't get no worse.
And it kind of is a dichotomy into their two personalities in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Paul more the optimist, John more the realist / pessimist at times.
Right.
And it dealt with some serious themes here, more so with Lennon's subject matter. Paul was talking about, kind of going through school and whatnot, and then we get to Lennon's subject.
Yeah, and Lennon talks about his line is, I used to be cruel to my women, and he talked about this in more than one interview way later on, that he said, I used to be a hitter. I used to hit my women. That was what I knew. I was violent, had a horrible temper, get into fights with guys. I would be abusive to my women. But he was making the point that he does love peace. He goes, you go the exact opposite direction. The peace and love was not a put on. He just realized he made a lot of mistakes when he was younger, and he owned up to them. But his contribution to the song is great. It works so well with the two kind of playing off of each other. Now we're up to Fixing a Hole, written by McCartney, sung by McCartney. The little bit of controversy on what this song's about. In a 1968 interview, he said it's about a hole in the road where the rain gets in. A good old analogy. The hole in your makeup, which lets the rain in and stops your mind from going where it will. He said it was also about their fans. They said usually around 500 fans on average would just sit outside of his house all the time.
Gotta love that, eh?
It's very off-putting to him, as you can well imagine. So he said it was also about that. Then in the 80s, he goes, well, it's really an ode to pop. That's what it was about. So there you go.
Yeah, and to me, when I was reading this, and Paul also alluded to this a little bit, it's about letting your mind wander and go away from those insecurities that you might have. I think that it just had, another unique twist to it. A little lighter musically than our previous two tracks, not as busy and compressed, but I thought that it was a good guitar solo again by Harrison in here, kind of fit the mood of just drifting. So overall, a great track.
Trey, that takes us into the next song, She's Leaving Home, McCartney with Lennon. McCartney wrote the verses, Lennon wrote the chorus, and they kind of go back and forth on it. And one of the things that makes this song different is it stays on a C chord constantly. McCartney actually talked about it. He said in the past they'd be switching back and forth, but on this song, they kept it the same.
In the way that Lennon and McCartney deliver their lines and their voices, very soft-spoken, very, a lot of emotion being driven forth. And this is about a woman, a girl in real life who ran away from home and this is written from the perspective of the first verse. It's the girl. She goes down the stairs. It's 5 a.m. She leaves a note that she hoped would say more. Quietly closes the door behind her. Then the parents get up, they see the note, and this really got me thinking, because they're sad, but they're not necessarily sad that she's gone. In a sense, they're looking to them like, man, we gave her all of our lives. They don't really fear for her safety or where she's at. They're like, man, we did everything we could.
Yeah, the mom actually says, how could she do this stuff to me?
I thought that was a unique take on it, and it's like, well, maybe that's why this girl is leaving home. And then the last verse kind of is from just third-person narrator view, where she's meeting up.
Guy from the motor trade.
Yeah, so it just really gets you thinking. I'm thankful to have a good relationship with my old man here, my dad. I know a lot of you wonder why I call him Sean. It's just for the purpose of the review, but I think this is one that would get many people thinking back in the day, and even now, like, oh man, how is my relationship with my parents?
Yeah, and it does end well, by the way, in real life. The girl who was 17 at the time, Melanie Coe, she did return home 10 days later, so it does end well. And next up, we're doing a winning track, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. I love this song.
Oh, this is great.
He wrote this song. He wrote it based off a poster that he had from a 19th century circus that had come to England. He bought the poster while they were filming the promotional stuff for Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, and it is just fire. It just plays out this whole story. He tells George Martin, I want the musical arrangement. I want to smell the sawdust on the floor. And that led to some interesting things, didn't it?
Yeah, they wanted to get an actual 19th century steam organ, and they ended up actually getting one. Played it around, didn't get what they wanted particularly, so George Martin just told Jeff Emmerich, hey, I want you to take the recordings we got, just chop them up, all right, cut them into pieces, and then we're going to resplice
19 pieces.
Yeah, we're going to resplice them together in random order, and we're just going to see what happens. And so you get some really unique sounds there towards the middle of the song, where it just all kind of goes into chaos. And
just like you were at a circus.
They did a great job throughout this whole record of evoking an image and a setting that they wanted the listener to be in, from Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds to She's Leaving Home, and to now this track. It's like, okay, I can picture the red and white circus tents coming up. I just thought this was the most unique musical track here with the sounds that it brought forth. Then that takes us into the start of the B-side and the only Harrison-led track on this record, Within You, Without You. Now this is going to be very Indian flavored, inspired in his 1966 journey to India. Of course, talking with Ravi Shankar, going deeper into his Hindu roots, which he kept for his entire life. He was a devout Hindu, and a lot of the lyrics and of course music incorporates Hindu and Indian culture. And this was only performed by Harrison and the Asian Music Circle, guys that were well versed in the instruments here, such as the tabla, the sitar.
Well, and the recording of this thing was just kind of how I would imagine it. He brought in the Asian Music Circle. They sat on the carpet in the studio. They turned the lights down. They burned some incense. They put Indian tapestries on the wall, and they just played their instruments. This thing is so instrumental, no pun intended, and Indian music really exploding at this time. It became more popular than it has ever been during this little period of time. When I first heard this song, honestly, I thought it was the worst song of the last 3 albums, which is not a bad thing to have, because the Rubber Soul Revolver and this album are absolute fire. This thing grew on me. I still don't know that I like it, but I respect the heck out of it.
Yeah, I would agree with you here. This definitely was the biggest grower, just because, I mean, we're not versed in, classic Indian music, so it's foreign to the ear, but the more you hear it, the more you appreciate it. And this is a song this and A Day in the Life are the two songs I respected the most musically.
And then the lyrics. We start diving into the lyrics of this. It's about not looking at what you can get for yourself. It's a total turning the back on Western culture and kind of with that Eastern Hindu, let's look at peace and
Yeah.
within ourselves, and not the material possessions and all of that, what we can get from people, but what we can be to people.
And I think that was, it was tough on George, I would assume, to be like, okay, how can I merge the East and West music and stylistic and, you know, worldview differences into one? And I think he did a good job of doing that, of not going too far one direction or the other. All in all, a song that I really respected.
Next, we're up to When I'm 64, written by McCartney, sung by McCartney. It's about, the theme of it is a young guy singing to his lover how they're going to age and what's it going to be like. Are you going to love me when I'm 64, when I do all these things? Interestingly enough, one of the first songs McCartney ever wrote, he was 15 or 16. The account of it kind of varies. Some people say he just wrote the music and not the lyrics. Others say he wrote the whole song. Whatever. It is a weird song on this album. It sounds like it could have been in one of their first albums. And ironically enough, they played it all the time in 1962 when they were in Hamburg, because the electricity would go out oftentimes, so they couldn't use their amps for the guitar. So Paul just jump on the piano and play this song. So while I like this song, I'm not sure it exactly fits on this album, but it's still a tremendous song.
It got me just thinking, you know, this guy's talking to his lover like, will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
Unconditional love.
Yeah.
You love me now because I can do all this stuff. What about if I couldn't?
Yeah, what about when we're old? I thought it was a good track. And that leads us right into another McCartney-led track, Lovely Rita.
Meter Maid.
The Meter Maid, baby. And this was inspired by a time when Paul got a ticket outside Abbey Road Studios by a female traffic warden, and he called her a meter maid, and that wasn't a term that a lot of people knew.
No, it wasn't. Nobody in Britain knew what that meant. It was an American term, meter maid, but he said he just liked it.
Yeah, so instead of being enraged that he got a ticket, it just kind of inspired him. This is another really solid McCartney track on this record, I thought.
It's also a different song musically like the previous one, but I think it does fit on this album. And this song, probably more than any of the others, grew on me. All right, next up, we're to Good Morning by Lennon. Inspired, he said when he was songwriting, he'd have the TV on very low. He needed some songs for this album. The time was ticking, and he didn't want to be left out. So TV's down low. He hears the jingle for cornflakes back in 1966 at the time he wrote this. And so it inspired him to write this song. Now, there's a lot of animal sound. This song is, I would imagine in 1967 you queued this up and it blew your mind.
And this was honestly one of my favorite tracks on here. I was reading online, some people don't like this thing. I think this thing is catchy. I like the up-tempo and the tempo shifts in this. And just the chorus is pretty awesome too. Just good morning, good morning. Just almost like an alarm clock going off. And again, we have an unbelievable guitar solo here. It talks about domestic life, the mundane aspects that all of us go through. We get up, ask about the kids, this and that, just put breakfast on, all that good stuff, and we're out here ready.
Watching a TV show in there, and McCartney way later on, said that he thought, Lennon was still married to Cynthia at this time, and it was also kind of, he was expressing his frustration that he felt trapped in that mundane life when he was at home, and they weren't touring anymore, so he's just there.
It's like, good morning, okay, this just keeps repeating, doing the same old thing, but all in all, I thought it was a very solid Lennon track. And the final sound we hear on this is a chicken clucking, and that was placed there because it leads right into the guitar for a reprise of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band reprise. And here, I liked it. It was just a little more faster paced than the opening track, a little more harder rock version.
Yes, I love that.
And
part
there's like a count up, and you can hear Lennon, just kind of almost sarcastically saying bye.
Yeah, it's between 2 and 3 if you listen for it. And this song's very short, Trey. The first version of this, song number 1, is 2 minutes. This is only 1 minute 18 seconds, one of the shortest songs in the catalog. If you're wondering what the shortest one is, it's Her Majesty. It's only 23 seconds.
And it kind of wraps up almost the concert in a sense. They say, we're sorry, but we have to go. We started with Billy Shears coming in and the opening Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, orchestra tuning up, crowd chatter, and now you kind of hear some crowd chatter as well in the background, and that just fades us right into A Day in the Life.
Yeah, and this is Lennon with McCartney. Lennon wrote most of it. McCartney wrote the middle 8. Song's over 5 minutes long. It's number 28 on the Rolling Stones top 500 songs of all time. On a separate list, Rolling Stones called it the greatest Beatles song of all time. They may be right. I'm very torn. This song is absolutely tremendous.
Blew me away.
And I mean, I did violate my rule. I said earlier you should listen to it in its entirety. I've listened to this song on its own. I don't know how many times outside of listening to the whole album. So the lyrics are based on different newspaper stories. Lennon was looking at the paper and saw these different things. The first one, the car crashed, was a guy that they knew, the 21-year-old heir to the Guinness fortune, died in a car wreck.
The transitions very uniquely into an orchestra that really just builds up. It was a 40-piece orchestra?
40-piece. McCartney wanted 90, but George Martin told him, we can't do 90, we're going to do 40. You mentioned in the opening, McCartney and Martin actually conducted this orchestra, which tells you where Paul has ascended now musically.
Yeah, and that took us into McCartney's part where he's talking about, hey, woke up, got out of bed, drug a comb across my head. Just talking about a day in the life, you know?
And interestingly enough, that wasn't part of this song. That was a song that he wrote, a part of another song that he wrote that he never finished, so he threw it in here, and it seems like it seamlessly works.
No, that's the beauty of this track. The transitions within each verse and music section just work so expertly together.
Yeah, and this song ends with one of the most famous endings of an album ever. You have Lennon, McCartney, Mal Evans, and Ringo are all sharing 3 different pianos. You got Martin over on the harmonium, and they all hit the E chord at exactly the same time, and they stretch it out for 40 seconds to end this album. And the time spent on this song, Trey, were 34 hours just on this one song, which I'm actually surprised it wasn't more with bringing in the orchestra and doing all that.
Ringo's drumming here is absolutely phenomenal.
It's considered one of the greatest drumming performances of all time by most critics.
Yeah, just the way he hits the cymbals and everything really just his drum fills here are just perfectly fit the song.
Yeah, I think this song may be one of my 5 favorite songs of all time. I don't want to suffer from recency bias, but this thing is great. So now we come to the difficult part. We always pick our favorite tracks. What do you think?
Well, A Day in the Life's got to be at the top. I really love Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, with a little help from my friends, Getting Better, Good Morning, She's Leaving Home. I mean, I took them all. What about you?
Yeah, we'll just go with that. There's only 3 songs on here I didn't absolutely rate nearly a 10 out of 10. So now we're to the difficult part, Trey, where we're going to rate this album. And for me, it's hard because I can't imagine taking this record home in 1967 and putting it on, right? So that places this thing, it's widely considered the most important album in rock music history. Now the question becomes, is it the best? That's a very hard thing. And like I said, I listen to this thing even more than I listen to most Beatles albums when we review them 25, 30 times. It grew on me enormously. We gave Revolver a 10. I think Revolver's the best album I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the best album I've ever heard, but I think it's close. I almost gave this one a 10, but a 10 slightly below Revolver. I'm going to go a 9.75. If you give it a 10, if you call it the greatest album ever, I get it. I'm not here to argue with you. It is definitely the most important album ever, and that almost got a 10 from me.
Yeah, I'm going to be right there with you, Sean. I'm going to be at a 9.75. Just the wide array of styles on this was really impressive. I think everybody was firing on all cylinders. You've had Ringo's best song to date. George instrumentally was bringing the heat on a variety of tracks.
George Martin played on we didn't even mention that he played on a variety of tracks as well. I mean, Emmerich's doing everything. Townsend's inventing more things.
Yeah, and of course Lennon and McCartney comes into his own more here than any other record. So I still prefer Revolver. Just because I think that's the best album I've ever heard.
But it's like,
you're comparing, really minute things here. So I'm going to go a 9.75 on this thing. Really, really impressed. It definitely lived up to the hype.
It did.
To the expectations on it. And I'm just excited to hear more and more of what the Beatles have to offer. Have been so impressed. You hear the hype behind it. So when you actually experience it and see it for yourself, it's just been such a fun journey. Really appreciate you guys watching and taking it with us. and we hope that you've learned some stuff in the process here. Let us know what you think of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band down below. What is your favorite track on this? Where would you rate it in their catalog? As always, Sean, appreciate. I know you put in a bunch of research on this. For a record like this, it's so nice to see the musicianship, the technical aspects, and the backstories behind this.
Oh yeah, it's a true journey. It's a true pleasure. I enjoy it immensely.
And again, guys, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. We upload twice a week in a variety of genres. There's going to be something there for everybody. And until next time, y'all, happy listening, my friends, and we will see you.